Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of StarCraft 2 Team Strategy. What we're going to be going through today is 4 versus 4 games, kind of common strategies you're going to encounter, both how to execute and how to kind of defend, the most common strategies you're going to find out there. Most of the time when you play 4v4, there's almost always going to be teams with 2 zergs. So you can usually expect that you're going to have early aggression, because the difference between 3v3 maps and the 4v4 maps is that most of the maps have split bases. So even if there is like a team play map or it's a team fortress, usually the bases are so far apart that it just makes sense to go early lanes and be aggressive. So in this game, what you really need to do is just kind of gather intel as quickly as possible, because you want to determine what your opponents are doing, because if they're doing a late pull or an early pull, your reaction should be a little bit different. So in this case, I noticed that he ended up getting an Overlord and more than, I believe he actually won a 12 pull, but he ended up going for more than just a 10 pull there. So when you see the Overlord pop out, that's usually a good sign that, okay, you don't need to get a Forge opening. And his partner did end up getting a 10 pull, but between my partner and I, as long as we block here, and I chrono boost out a Zeld or two, we should be able to hold that early on. And this is really what you should do. If you're going against like 110 pull or 10 pull or 14 pull or anything like that, as long as there's not 2 zergs doing 10 pulls, you don't necessarily need to get a Forge first in a game like this, because my Zelds are going to be able to buy time here. Now, being that there's 2 zergs on the other team, what one of my Terran partners over here should have done is going Reactored Hellion into, say, Marauder, or just going Mass Blue Flame Hellion, while his partner gets just Mass Bio. Because when you're going against 2 zergs in 4v4, I can almost guarantee you that every game they're going to get Lings. You're almost never going to see Roach pushes unless they're bad, in which case you're just going to win pretty easily. So if one of them gets Hellions, usually the first 2 Hellions pop out right around 5 minutes. So we're at 4:33 here. So this isn't a whole lot of time that I have to buy. And once we get a Stalker out here, we can basically repel these Lings. And with a little bit better micro, we probably could have kept that Cyber from going below half health. Now, if we had some Hellions out right here, we probably have about 4 Hellions by this point. This Proxy Pylon's up, but his Warp Gate is not done yet. Warp Gate usually doesn't finish until about 5:40 to 6 minutes into the game, so you could take that time between 5 and 6 minutes to get a little bit map control and deny Proxy Pylons, because when you're playing against Protosses in 4v4, there's so many places they can hide pylons. And if you can just make sure that they're not too close to your base, so you have a little more reaction time, that's what's going to usually be the difference between winning and losing a game. However, in here, we did have enough units to probably go out there, but we were just a little bit too passive right here. And shortly after this, he's going to warp in a whole bunch of Stalkers. And Green, who ended up getting a little bit later a pull, gets Banelings, and they're going to try and bust him. Now the other problem with one of our partners not going Hellions here is these Marauders and Marines are kind of nice, but they don't really kill the Lings quick enough to be able to get to the Stalkers, because all the Lings are doing at this point is just buffering damage so the Stalkers can do damage. Because in a straight up fight, the Stalkers are going to lose to all this bio. However, as soon as the Lings get in there and they kind of go for a surround on the Marine Marauder, then suddenly the fight's not so even anymore. You can see it's the Lings that really make the difference here. Now, if we had a Force Field or 2 there, we might have been able to hold that first wave, but it didn't really matter because he ended up getting DTs in here. And I did get a Robo, but I probably would have only had one Observer out. He would have either lost his main or lost a bunch of workers in the meantime. But if we had been able to deny that Proxy Pylon, we wouldn't have gotten ourselves into this situation in the first place. And that's how a lot of your games are going to go. Now, if you're on more of a Team Fortress map and you don't have any Zergs, you're going to have a little bit easier time dealing with this really aggressive strategy. In that case, if you're on, say, District 10, or I believe there's another one, maybe Falsa Quarry or something like that, and you have no Zerg players, you're going to be able to block completely and they're not going to get it. And it's going to be a lot easier to defend. But since there's split bases on this map, it makes it very hard to get out on the map initially to defend against early Lings and Hellions and Warp Attack and everything. Alright, well I think that covers it for this game then, and the next game we'll get into is going to feature kind of what you should do if you end up getting the exact same races as your opponent. So in the next game we're going to be looking at 2 Zergs, a Terran, and a Protoss. Welcome back for game 2, guys. What we're going to be looking at here is, as I said before, 2 Zergs, a Protoss, and a Terran. So the strategy you should be going for in this case is reactor Hellions with a gas first build for the Terran. Your Zergs, if you want to get the earliest speed possible and have the most lings out on the map as quickly as possible, then you should go 10 pulls. However, it's also a pretty decent build to do a double extractor trick and get 12 pulls, but in that case you're going to have to be a little bit more defensive and your speed's going to come maybe 5 to 10 seconds later. So you have to be kind of wary against players who do a 10 pull if you do a 12 pull. But you do get a lot more lings quickly because when you do a 12 pull you get a queen out, but no one in this game did that. Everybody went for a 10 pull, which is perfectly normal. And all the Zergs, once they end up getting 100 gas, they're going to be pulling their workers out of gas just to make sure that they have enough to constantly create lings and eventually get a queen. Now the big differences you're going to see in this game is I'm not going to go with just the standard 4-gate here. I end up going for Blinkstalker, and that pretty much ends up being the reason we end up winning this game. That's not to say that 4-gate is bad necessarily, but if the game ends up lasting any length of time beyond the first 10 minutes, Blinkstalkers are almost always going to pay for themselves. Now my partners go for a little bit of a spine crawl rush here, but when you're going against your opponents and they do the same pull timings as you do, both get 10 pulls, they're pretty much going to be able to defend against a spine crawler rush like this, because they're going to have almost as many lings out as you do, and the spine crawlers might cause them to pull workers, but unless if one of them goes for a 14 pull, you're just not going to have enough lings early on in order to execute it. But they were able to kill a few workers, partly because of a little bit poor teamwork by the Zergs on their team. So you can notice once again it's 5 minutes into the game and we have our first Hellions out on the map. So from this point it usually kind of becomes a Ling Hellion war, maybe for the next minute until Stalkers get out on the map. So what you just need to do is, you don't necessarily need to constantly be fighting, but just try and just kind of reposition your units so that, just like this player did here, so you can get the best engagement possible. As a result of that, they are able to shortly hereafter get a little bit of an advantage and go in and do some damage to purple. And he was also able to set up that pylon as a result of that poor engagement. But my units are out on the map, and at this point I almost have Blink done, and this is going to make a pretty big difference in the upcoming fight. So purple did end up losing a lot of his workers here, and he's able to recreate them. But we were able to clean up all those units because we did some damage to him initially, and he lost a bunch of workers, so they had less lings, and they weren't able to engage us once we ended up coming into the base there. And this engagement coming up here, his money's getting a little bit high, which is not so good. But Blinkstalker is not only going to keep your units alive, but you're also going to be able to reposition yourself in engagements much quicker. So if you find Stalkers just kind of chilling out in the open, you can usually do some damage to them.